Welcome once again to 26 North Halstead. I'm your host, George Blaze. Last winter, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit struck down the Illinois law prohibiting the carrying of concealed firearms as unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. The negotiations over concealed carry went on through the 2013 spring session, and numerous versions of the bill were filed and debated. The General Assembly eventually passed a bill during a special summer session. The Illinois Firearm Concealed Carry Act became effective on July 9, 2013, and since then, a number of training facilities have begun to operate in the Chicagoland area. Joining us today is Marc, owner and operator of Concealed Carry Safety for Personal Defense Incorporated in Niles, Illinois. Marc, thanks for coming.
Good to see you again, George.
We had a couple technical difficulties last time I had you on, but I really appreciate you taking time to really get this together, because I think this conversation and this dialogue is something we need to all be having, no matter what side of the issue you choose to be on. But first, let's get a little bit of background on your experience in terms of firearms. I mean, you have a lengthy tenure and bio in terms of law enforcement.
Yeah, I was first licensed to carry a firearm by what was then the basic security law enforcement training in 1975, and that was after leaving the military. And I've been involved on an on and off basis in personal protection, private detective, private security, then became a police officer, and later, after becoming a police officer, I was selected to be a staff instructor at our police academy, and I really got into that quite a bit. And, many pages of certifications for the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, some of them even having me certified to teach other instructors how to teach it. So, yeah, there's a depth of knowledge and experience there, and I'm so very grateful to my former employer for that.
Now, of course, you know, it was a long struggle getting this law changed here in the state of Illinois. Illinois is the last state in the 50 states to really have a concealed carry law. What was this? Why did this happen? Why did this change occur?
Well, essentially, there were many lawsuits brought on behalf of people and funded by pro-gun groups like the NRA and the ISRA, Illinois State Rifle Association. And the weight of these forced them to go on past the normal circuit court, state courts, and into the U.S. Appellate Court. At that point, a review of the intent of the law was properly handed down, in my opinion, by the Seventh Circuit, saying the law in Illinois violated the constitutional rights of the people in the state to be able to protect themselves. And it doesn't end at your property line, or as some municipalities would have you believe, if you have a detached garage, that's not entitled to you being able to protect yourself while investigating a possible crime against your property. Interestingly enough, when this Concealed Carry Act was passed, the laws in the state had subsequently been, I shouldn't say subsequently, but around the same time had been rewritten to allow use of force in defense of person, in defense of others, in defense of dwelling, and defense of property. Not a true man state where people could just, trouble's coming, I'm standing my ground, you have to justify it. I understand that, and I believe that to be the case, and I counsel people in my training, please avoid the problem. Don't carry a gun and look for trouble. Carry a gun and avoid trouble, even more so than you would have unarmed, because you now have a tremendous responsibility to yourself, society, and the people around you.
Now, of course, as you move from your professional life in law enforcement into your personal business and opening up a training facility, and there are a lot of challenges facing you then. Finally, the Niles Village Council voted unanimously to allow you to operate and open your business. Tell me a little bit about the specifics of your business and what allowed you to get through this process.
One of the things that really was prevalent in the questions from the, first was the Planning Commission, which did vote unanimously to recommend the licensure for special use. The City Council, one person voted against it, and that person certainly is free to choose and follow their mind. The concept that they were most concerned with was, is it going to be a, quote, gun facility? They're trying to rebrand Niles, and they don't want it known as Gun USA. And I can certainly understand that, but the law is the law. Honest, law-abiding concealed carry license holders are not a threat to anyone. They are a deterrent to crime, and statistic after statistic after statistic has proved every place in the country where concealed carry has become law, where it wasn't, violent crime plummeted. The criminal just doesn't know who might be able to resist them. They're unwilling to take that risk.
Of course, as you were one of the challenges, one of the things that the Village of Niles really wanted you to do is to make sure there wasn't the word gun visible or pictures of guns or anything in the particular area that you were opening and operating.
They asked what my signage would be, and I said I intended to display on the large sign just the name of my business. And I gave them my word, and I will do that. Will there be some depictions of firearms somewhere in the place? Absolutely. That's what I teach. The reality of it is we're going to have to look at and handle some firearms. And I gave them my word that nobody but myself would carry a live firearm into the training area. And that's a basic concept of police and civilian firearms training. When you're teaching, other than on a range, there are no firearms or ammunition in the place. I'm going to be providing a safe where people will put their firearms if they're already a concealed carry holder, and I hope to be able to do some tactical training for police, put them up. And even when we train police officers, they're disarmed prior to the training, or we take them each one into a safe place, and two people make sure that firearm's unloaded if it has to be used as a part of the training. So it's more of a prop than a firearm. And that's my commitment, not only to them, but to everybody. That avoids accidents. And to me, safety is job number one. When I was on the job and a trainer and the people that worked with me, I thought I was kind of a pain in the butt when it came to safety, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm not willing to watch somebody avoidably get hurt.
And that's one of the things about you is that to the detriment of your own business prospects, I mean, you speak on behalf of other people who want to open up businesses that are going to be competing with you because you're the expert that people want to come to in terms of understanding what this is all about.
The Village Council is faced with a difficult decision right now. They're going to be actually having a vote tonight. I've said everything I can say about it to them on other occasions. I'm not going to burden them repeating it. They have an ordinance that's in place. They consider the law, and they'll make a decision based on that. Emotional issues of I like or don't like guns, or by that being near a school it presents a danger. There is no credible evidence, I should say no evidence of any kind that proximity to a school presents any danger. It's not.
Actually, I tell you what, Mark, let's take a short break, and when we come back, I want to get into that part of the debate and the issue and understanding, and I want to get into some particulars of the actual law so people have a better understanding of what concealed carry in Illinois looks like and what it actually means. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Welcome back to 26 North Halstead. Today talking about concealed carry in Illinois. My guest, Marc Jens, owner and operator of Concealed Carry Safety for Personal Defense Incorporated in Niles, Illinois. Marc, before the break, we were talking a little bit about the emotion that people bring to the debate or to try and understand concealed carry and firearms in general, particularly here in Cook County, in the city of Chicago specifically. There's so many things going on. People tend to point to firearms as the problem or the reason why we have so much violence on the street. I'm not so sure about that. As a more than 20-year professional law enforcement person and a trainer in firearms, just give me your personal views on that.
The evidence just isn't there, George. Like I said a little bit earlier, every place in the country, without exception, that has enacted concealed or open carry were honest, law-abiding citizens, and they're regulated the same as they should be regulated to drive a car. Some background check is done even more so than to drive an automobile. In Illinois, they either do a complete background check, and if they can't do it manually, you're mandated to then give the fingerprints. Most people give them up front. The concept of the firearms being the villain is not the issue. It's the sociological factors, in my opinion, that create lawless people, people without social conscience. Will there always be a way to get a hand on something that can cause a crime of violence? Absolutely. Does a gun make it a little easier for those folks? Sure it does. Could they take a car and drive it into a crowd of people they don't like, as has been done? Now you have a 2,000-pound bullet traveling at 60 miles an hour.
And I guess, being in law enforcement as long as you have, you've seen the extent and the cruelty that people can be to other people. That it rarely involves firearms. There's so many other ways that people hurt other people.
Most murders are, other than these drive-by gang issues, but most murders are committed in a fit of emotional, heightened anger between people that care enough about each other to get angry about it. And that's why in the home, people get hurt more. And then they'll pick up a knife, pick up a hammer. Are guns being used sometimes? Sure. we cannot make a perfectly safe society unless everybody walks around in a steel shell and doesn't move. Given that, we give up certain freedoms in our society to live and coexist with other people. You can't breathe the same air I'm breathing at the same time. You got to wait till I'm done with it.
Right.
So we all understand the compromise. And in my classes, right on the top of the board in big letters is the word compromise, because everything is a compromise.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your philosophy behind firearms training. Is 90% of what you're teaching people is mental, about decision making, and a little portion of it is the physical motor memory of how to operate a weapon properly. Talk to me about that.
What I try to instill in people is the concept is avoid trouble. You have the ability to walk away from it. Run away, so they'll call you a chicken. Big deal. The concept that I jokingly use in class is, okay, you've got your concealed carry license. That doesn't make you bulletproof, but you might start thinking, and I ran into that same thing with police recruits. They start thinking that makes them bulletproof, and it doesn't. They might go into an area where they might not, others thinking, I can equalize it. So what I say to people is, don't go to 63rd and Halsted at 2 in the morning to buy crack, unless that's what you normally do. But just because you now have a firearm, avoid it even more. You want to avoid circumstance where you might be forced to use that, because it changes innumerable lives in the time it takes to pull that trigger.
And that whole concept of situational awareness is a lot of what you teach. You have kind of a color-coded system. I was wondering if you could run that down for me as well.
What runs down from is all the way from white to black. White being totally oblivious, walking around. Picture Pee Wee Herman with his iPad and earphones in, la 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 la, and he walks right into a sewer hole, or walks right. And I've seen people, I'm sure you have,
I've seen it.
Playing, and they walk right into a pole.
I've seen it.
How did that happen?
Right.
Their situational awareness is gone.
My brother-in-law works for CDOT. He does sidewalks, and he posts a picture every day of someone on their cell phone has walked through fresh concrete, gone around barriers. That complete obliviousness is a real thing.
And criminals love that. They showed films to violent convicted criminals in the state penitentiaries, and they said, which people would you attack, which people you wouldn't? And then they had them listed. Then they went back and showed them the film, say why. He wouldn't have known what I was going to do to him until after it was over. So we go from white, which is what most people tend to walk around in, and I like to get them to think yellow. Situational awareness, the exact words you use. Look around. Let's say you were a menacing-looking individual walking towards me. I look right at you, and I turn to walk away, and you start to follow me. I'll turn and confront you. What do you want? What's your problem? You don't want that if you're a criminal. You'll leave.
One of the things that just I noticed in doing some research is there seems to be almost I don't know if it's a conflict, but you have the FOID card here in Illinois, which doesn't have all of the same restrictions that the concealed carry card has in terms of background checks. Why don't they just fold them together?
It's very interesting that you mentioned that. If you read the Concealed Carry Act, there is actually a section in it creating by law a commission to study doing just that. Problems that came up, I actually got a call from some of the people that were on it, and my opinion was, A, you have a problem with time lapse. FOID is valid for 10 years, your concealed carry is valid for 5 years. One is going to expire before the other, right. Especially if you don't renew them exactly at the same time, then there's going to be staggered dates. It is conceivable that you might want to give up your concealed carry, but still retain your FOI. That being said, they decided wisely, I believe, to leave them as separate documents for now, with the greater burden being on a person that wishes to have the privilege, of being armed in public, a much more in-depth background check, and the minimum training at the 16 hours that they have in Illinois. I'm probably going to get criticized for this, but that is basic marksmanship, basic law. It's good to get you started, but it's enough to get you in trouble. So 16
hours is not enough?
Not in my opinion. Because a person that goes through that course learns at a minimum to be able to put a certain number of rounds in controlled circumstances at a range into a paper target of about the size of a person, that scoring range, Are they really prepared to engage force on force with a person and having never experienced having to draw from the holster? Most ranges won't allow that for safety. I understand that. It makes sense.
And just if you think about, just like with CPR training, it's something you got to go back and retrain yourself, because you're going to forget some things and you're going to get sloppy, particularly because we hope you never have to use this kind of thing. So to be proficient at it, it's something you have to revisit on a regular basis. Let's take another short break. When we come back, we'll have more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to 26 North Halsted. Today, talking with my good friend, Marc Jens, owner and operator of Concealed Carry Safety for Personal Defense Incorporated in Niles. Marc, when students first come into your training and your class, what are the biggest misconceptions they come into the room with that you have to kind of overcome?
Most of them don't really understand what the law stops them from doing and allows them to doing, and how to mix the two. The 4-hour section on law would seemingly be the most boring, where I say get some toothpicks to prop your eyes open, and yet I have had, the first class I ever did, everybody in the class of 15 were held 3 concealed carry permits from other states. And to a person, they have said they learned more in that class than they did in any of the others. I don't want to blow my own horn, but
sure,
I make sure that we go through it and discuss it, and I encourage discussion in the class so everyone's questions are answered.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I mean, for people who are familiar with firearms, there's something called a Utah concealed carry license that's out there. How does that differ, or how does that transcend state lines here in Illinois with our concealed carry law, or how does that work?
It's very interesting. As a matter of fact, blowing my own horn a bit, I'm about to receive my Utah concealed carry instructor, so I'll be able to certify people here. Utah is recognized in 33 or 36 states. I'd have to check the exact law, what it is today. Illinois is not recognized in any other states at present. There are 3 different levels of being able to carry a firearm in another state. There is honor, recognition, and reciprocity. Honoring means that they will allow you peaceful carry and you may use it to defend yourself through the state. Recognition is they legally recognize your right to carry in that state, not just passing through. Okay. Reciprocity means you're Illinois, I'm Wisconsin. I recognize your legal right here and you recognize my legal right there. It's both recognize each other with full rights and privileges, kind of like the full faith and allegiance clause in the Constitution. As such, Utah is pretty much the golden standard, and I'm very privileged that they're allowing me to be able to teach that here, because it helps our people to leave the boundaries of our state and lawfully be able to protect themselves.
And is the Utah license recognized here in Illinois as far as this law is concerned?
Illinois has not recognized reciprocity or honored any other states as of yet. They're getting ready to, I believe, because they're allowing us to teach the concealed carry course, and they can get a concealed carry permit in Illinois as a resident of certain other states, provided their laws, and the word in the law is substantially similar to the Illinois law. The most controlling factor would be background check, hands-on firearms instruction, and participating in the National Law Enforcement Training System, NLETS, which is an exchange of information between states where they fully and freely exchange information.
And that's one of the things about the Illinois law, that if you go into the particulars of it, when you apply for this, well, once you've qualified to apply for the concealed carry law, you've gone through the class, then you can apply, and it doesn't happen the other way around. Your application goes through various levels of law enforcement, from Homeland Security to the ATF, all the way on down, and at any level, they can turn it away.
Yeah, actually, Illinois just changed the administrative rules a couple days ago regarding the board that of review for people that are rejected, because there's a provision in it, and wisely so, for local law enforcement where you live to be able to file an objection based on their ability to have had more interaction with you.
Right. And that goes for multiple DUIs as well. If you've had, I think it's 3 or more, 2 or more.
2 convictions in the last 5 years, you're ineligible for concealed carry. That comes under the concept of you being an habitual user of alcohol, which they don't want to put a gun in someone's hand that could be out of control. If you're an habitual user of drugs, you're ineligible. If you are under the influence of alcohol or any drug, and that means influence, take aspirin, that doesn't influence you. If you're taking something that's a mood altering or awareness altering, it's kind of like don't drive when taking this,
right.
You shouldn't be carrying your firearm, and you can't be carrying your firearm when you're taking it.
And that's another thing people need to understand about this is that having a concealed carry license in the state of Illinois, we don't have a castle law here in Illinois. We don't have stand your ground. You're going to court, and you may end up in prison if something happens, if you pull your weapon out and use it. I mean, you have to face this reality of the responsibility as well.
I tell people that if you wind up using your weapon in self-defense, be prepared to be put through the ringer unless there are multiple witnesses and cameras showing this guy fired at you first, was coming at you with a knife. You are almost certainly going to be taken into custody. You are probably going to be arrested. At some point, you may probably be charged, and the percentages go down with each step. Excuse me. And at that point, your life, as you know it, just changed completely because the expense and what it does to you is horrendous. It's like being arrested for DUI destroys your life.
Particularly in Chicago, in Cook County. I mean, Anita Alvarez is going to come down like lightning on anybody who pulls a weapon with a concealed carry license. I can see it happening. I can see it now, simply because prosecutorial discretion. They want to make sure nobody thinks this is a free-for-all here in Cook County.
Interestingly enough, I was able to obtain a copy of the Chicago Police Department General Order because they very wisely put out a general order to guide their police officers in dealing with concealed carry licensees. And it actually fairly represents what the law says. It doesn't arrest them all and we'll sort it out later. No, it actually allows for the officer to determine that the person is a concealed carry licensee, and if they're not involved, especially not involved in a shooting incident, to be treated fairly. Used to be, they catch you with a gun in Chicago, you're probably going to get charged and you're never, ever going to see that firearm again.
Right.
And that's not the case anymore. Now, let's say you're in an accident and you have a concealed licensed firearm on you. The paramedics will call the police, who will take custody, give you a receipt for it. When you're better, you come back in, you give the receipt, and you get your firearm back, as it should be. And I applaud them for being that fair, considering the mounting evidence that Chicago tend to be somewhat anti-gun because they're so concerned with the gun violence in the city. And that, I don't like using that term. It's violence, it's sociological.
Guns happen to be involved.
It happens to be guns happen to be involved.
Well, I tell you what, Mark, let's take another short break. When we come back, we'll have some closing thoughts. I want to get kind of your viewpoint and your philosophy in terms of how law enforcement views civilian concealed carry here in Illinois, just from your experience. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. What a great conversation today. Hopefully this sparks more conversation and more dialogue about this issue, and informs you if you're making a decision one way or the other about owning a firearm. Marc Jens, owner and operator of Concealed Carry Safety for Personal Defense, Inc. Marc, as a law enforcement professional, and you've known a lot of cops, how do cops feel about civilians walking around with guns?
It's very interesting, George, that police are a microcosm of the society from which they're drawn. So, of course, their opinions and emotional reactions vary as they do in society at large. Some police officers feel in an elitist manner, no one should have firearms but us. They're entitled to their opinion. I disagree because we as the police are vastly outnumbered and we need everyone's help more than we need to get in their way. If society doesn't support us, we can't do our job. I think most police officers, if people comply with the way the Illinois law is written, if they request of you, are you a concealed carry license holder, do you have a firearm, you're obligated under law to say yes. And if they do that, I think it'll ratchet down the nervousness a little bit, because we are always concerned, especially during an investigatory or a traffic stop on the street. You feel you rolled through a stop sign and that's why I'm stopping you. It's a pain in the butt, you're trying to get your quota. Not the case, that's our job. We say, did you just kill 14 people and you're fleeing from it and I'm walking up there to be murdered? We don't know what's in that car. As such, when firearms become involved by concealed carry holders, I believe that the computer system that when officers enter license plates and they correlate to the person's driver's license, it's going to come up on the record and show that they're a concealed license holder, and I hope it does.
Is that going to change the nature of the interaction between you and law enforcement? Just, I mean, in your professional
I don't
opinion?
think so, because I think law enforcement will be asking the right questions. Under Illinois law, if they choose to, without any articulable reason, you're a concealed carry holder, you lawfully have a firearm on you. During the time I'm in contact with you, I can take charge of that and then return it to you if I don't charge you with it. It's kind of messy to do that because you're handling loaded firearms on the street, but they know they can do that. I think the most important thing you can do, and I tell this to the people in my classes, even though you're not obligated to volunteer that you're carrying a loaded firearm, if a police officer is in contact with you and they are surprised by seeing a gun, they're going to rightfully get nervous because they don't know you're one of the good guys. I advise people, even though the law requires the officer to ask first, keep your hands visible. Officer, I'm a concealed carry license holder. I'm carrying a firearm. It's on my right hip. What's going to be the worst thing that can happen? They'll check and make sure you're legal. Possibly they'll take charge of the firearm, but it's not an issue. You reach for your driver's license when he tells you to, and then he sees the gun. You may wind up looking down the barrel of a gun of a very nervous man on the other end, man or woman, I'm sorry.
These are the things that are being, these are things that you're teaching in your class and in the 16 hours of training. The mental mind state that you need to be to handle the responsibility. And I would assume that there are people that after going through a few hours are like, you know what, this is too much for me. I changed my mind about the whole thing. Do you see people backing out?
I came real close in a class that I taught yesterday. And on a break, a guy came up to me, asked a bunch of questions, and he finally decided, you know, this is something I need to do to keep myself and my family safe. And one of the things that we do at Concealed Carry Safety for Personal Defense is we are an ongoing resource. You don't pay your money, take the class, and I don't want to hear from you again. My phone is available, my laser practice range. You have a question and you want to sit down over a cup of coffee, we're there like almost 10 to 10 almost every day. My wife and myself.
I was going to say, I didn't bring up Connie. Connie is the other half, 70% of what's going on here is your wife.
She's the driving force behind all of the mechanics and running the business. I'm the talent, if you will, like you are here. It takes a lot of people to keep you on the air.
I appreciate that. I've been called worse. Mark, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Good to see you, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future. We'll have a couple more people on here and have this dialogue continuing so people have a better understanding of everything.
I'd be privileged, and I hope that you'll visit our facility. I'd love to have you see us in operation.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week on 26 North Halsted.